Okay, so hi, I'm Evan Kruger. I'm a third year in the program in CHS. Welcome. I love this department still, and I'm excited to welcome you here. So today I'm talking about test taking and strategies for test taking. I hear that the last talk was really sort of interactive and collaborative, and I want it to be the same today. So if you have questions, please feel free to shout them out. There's only so long I can talk about taking tests without answering questions. So please do feel free to chime in if you have questions or even insights. Okay, so first I want to get a sense. I think most people are coming out of undergrad or this is their first time in grad school. I think it's important to first note that those are two different things. I can tell you my own experience. In undergrad, I was a neurobiology major, so I took a lot of tests. I got really good at taking tests, and then I started grad school, and tests were like totally different, and it was this like new learning curve, and it was like wake-up call for me. So I think this is probably something that everyone experiences when they start grad school, and it really, a lot of it has to do with sort of different mentalities or different things that you're supposed to get out of these two different types of school, right? In undergrad, for me, it was all about the curve, the bell curve, and being at the top of the curve, and being better than enough other people to like get your A or your B or whatever in your class, and there was this need to sort of like prove yourself, right? Grad school is a little bit different. You've already proved yourself. You've already gotten in. There's sort of an underlying assumption that you're already smart. Okay, so don't like not try to prove that, but it's already assumed. Okay, so that sort of difference in mentality, I think, leads to a difference in like the types of things that you're tested on. Right. So in undergrad, it's a lot more about regurgitation. Can you remember everything you read in the textbook and then spit it out on a multiple choice test? Sorry, regurgitation, not the best word. Grad school, though, it's more about, can you understand major, big concepts that you're learning in class? Can you take these big concepts and think critically about them? Can you apply them to new problems, to new skills? Can you integrate information? And so for that reason, the tests might look a little bit different. Even if you're sort of taking a paper and pencil test, it might look a little bit different here. Okay. So I will get into sort of different types of tests that you're likely to encounter here, but here are some general pieces of advice that apply to all tests. And again, I'm speaking from personal experience on this first one. Read the instructions carefully. I know that sounds kind of silly, maybe, but the instructions tell you exactly what you're supposed to do. They tell you if you're supposed to define something. They tell you if you're supposed to like describe a process. And really sort of paying attention to what it is that you're supposed to be doing helps you answer the question better. You might write a really good response to a test question that is this like really well written, beautiful thing, but you didn't actually answer the question, and so you're not going to get credit for it, and that feels really bad, right? So reading the instructions carefully and reading them multiple times really helps, I think, keep you on the right page. Okay, so Dr. Innocenzo has a rule called circle the verb, and I think this does work. So if you're asked to define something, if you're asked to define, like what social stratification is, say what it is and then move on. There's more questions to come. If you're asked to describe it, though, or apply it to an example, like do that. So circling the verb helps you know exactly sort of what you're supposed to be doing with the concept that you're talking about. Secondly, and this is important, it's, you're in school. The point here is it's hard. You're supposed to struggle. You're going to make mistakes, and that's how you learn, and that's totally okay, and it happens. Everyone makes mistakes. Even if you have a relatively bad exam, that doesn't feel good, right? Lick your wounds, stand up, brush yourself off, and move on. Think big picture here. You're here to learn a big skill set and be able to take it off into the world. One exam does not have to define how you're going to do in all of grad school. So learn from your mistakes. And relatedly, I think it's also really important to talk to your instructors, talk to your special readers. First, it's their job to talk to you, so they have to talk to you. Okay. They're a really great resource. They've either designed the class or they've probably taken it themselves last year or the year before. So they really know what they're talking about. If you're struggling with something, again, that's totally cool. You're supposed to struggle. That's why you're here. And they're here to help you figure things out. So if you really are struggling, don't be ashamed. Go and ask. If you are, a little bit hesitant to talk to professors, I think another good source, though, is other students in the class that you're taking. the class with, right? So talk to your peers. Everyone has their own strengths. Everyone knows some things and everyone doesn't know other things. And working with each other to study for exams or to talk between classes, I think really helps you cement these concepts that you're struggling with personally in your head, and then helps you then do better on exams. Does that make sense? So, talk. Are there any questions, by the way? Okay, so in terms of exam types, there are a couple of different types of exams, and you're likely to experience different types in different types of classes. But there are in-class typed exams where you're probably used to them. You come to class and you're given the paper and you use your pen and you answer the questions that you're given. Those happen, I think, probably more so in your earlier years in the foundational courses, maybe in your EPI and your biostats classes. And then as you progress through the program, you start to get into more specialized classes, and your exams really stop becoming like exams, and they're more papers. And I personally think papers are more fun, right? You get to learn about whatever it is that you want to learn about, and learn about it to the best of your ability, and then say it. So you're likely to experience these two types of exams and move more towards the paper type of exam over your time here. Okay. So some general advice. This is Evan's general advice when it comes to in-class exams. I think number one is keeping again, big picture. It's just an exam. It's not the end of the world. It's why are you here? You're here to learn and to grow and to move on eventually. So keeping that in mind helps you, one, I think, reduce anxiety, right? So take steps to reduce anxiety. It is just an exam. You can do things to do better on that exam. You can do things like set aside enough time to study. I mean, I think everyone always says that. Everyone inevitably doesn't, and you have to, it's fine. But really do try to set aside enough time to study for an exam. There's a lot of reading. There's a lot of talking with your peers and with your special readers and your instructors to really solidify these concepts. And that takes time to do. So setting aside enough time to really get these concepts in your head helps you do better on the exams, and that helps you be less anxious about them. Getting enough sleep the night before, that's a big one. You've probably heard it a million times. You're clearer headed the next day, right? If you have to take an exam at 9 in the morning and you stayed up until 5 in the morning studying for it, you're probably not going to be your best. So do your studying up until the day before, and then relax. Just let it sink in and go into your exam as rested as you possibly can. Another point, this probably happens to everyone. Inevitably you're going to be late sometimes, and that's really hard to do, especially in LA when there's there's traffic. You're going to be late sometimes. Don't let that happen in an exam, okay? So if you have an exam at 9 a.m., it's worth waking up 30 minutes earlier, just to leave 30 minutes earlier so that there's no doubt you'll be on time, right? I mean, think about your mental sort of happiness. It's sitting in traffic when you're supposed to be in an exam is not a good place to be. So don't show up late. But also, do what makes sense for you. I also don't like to show up early, right? I don't like to sit in a room with everyone else and get kind of anxious about an exam. I like to show up right on time. Some people like to show up early. They set out their things and they have their pencil, and it all works, and that's great. So just find your thing. Find what makes sense for you. Don't be late, but just do things that help reduce anxiety. Any questions? So another, I think, thing to recognize is an exam is meant to assess a large amount of information that you've learned, right? So it's all about maximizing your benefit. This is how I tend to think of exams. Get the most out of it, get the most points out of it that you can, and then move on. You're not going to know everything. That's okay. Know enough to do well, and move on. So, like I said, you don't need to know every single thing to do well. If there's something you're really struggling with, do your best to learn it, but just make sure you're really good at the other stuff that you're likely to get tested on, so that it all sort of evens out, right? Another thing to note is, when you first get your test and you're reading through your instructions a million times, also look at the questions that you're being asked. Different questions are worth different amounts. Does that make sense? So question 1 might be worth 5% of the grade, but question 2 might be worth 20% of the grade. So if you spend, the first half hour really trying to define social stratification really well to get your 5 points, great, you're going to get your 5 points, but now you've rushed on your 20-point question and every other question after that. So I tend to move through an exam with the biggest point types of questions and move towards the smaller point questions. So if I do run out of time or something, I've at least answered the questions that get me the most points. Another way of maximizing benefit, I think, is plan to finish early. So if you're given an hour and a half to do your exam, in your head, or in my head, this is what I do. I say, okay, I have an hour and like 15 minutes, and then I sort of plan my time accordingly. That way, at the end, I have 15 minutes to go back and, read over everything I said, sort of change things if I didn't make sense on something. If I'm running behind, well, at least I've got that extra 15 minutes to, quickly figure out what I'm trying to do. So planning to finish early, in essence, gives you extra time in the end. So I find that helpful. Finally, if you read a question and if you read a question, try to figure out what the answer is in your head first, right? So if it's like a multiple choice question and you're asked what does XYZ mean, figure out what that is before you look at the questions and get bogged down and get confused and well, is it A or is it C or is it maybe it's B. Try to have the answer in your head before you look at the responses, and that helps you really sort of sort through them a lot easier. Any questions? You guys don't have any questions today. So. Yeah.
So in your experience, based off of
Mm-hmm.
the questions you said might be worth more,
Yeah.
how did you know did they lay it out in the test for you, or did you check in with your TAs about that?
I think oftentimes, yeah, you'll know, on the exam, it'll tell you how much a given question is worth. So it really is just about maximizing your time. So don't waste. Nothing's wasted time. But don't spend all of your time on a 5-point question. And you should know. Yeah.
It'll probably say something like there are 10 true/false questions, and it'll say 1 point each.
Mm-hmm.
And then if there's short answer questions where you have to write a sentence or two, it'll say something like 10 points each. So you can very easily tell where the points are on the exam.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I listed a couple of, I think sort of standard question types that you're likely to encounter if you, come to class and it's sort of an in-class type of exam, right? So you're likely to get some short answer and essay types of questions. A lot of the same rules apply. So again, read the instructions before and after you answer the question. Make sure once you've answered the question, did I go off on some tangent and really answer, some piece of this but not the whole picture, or did I really answer what I was supposed to answer? I oftentimes find, I sort of went off on a tangent, I need to sort of bring it back around. And, it takes 20 seconds more to read the question again, figure that out, and then spend the extra few minutes to actually get all of my points for the question. So before and after, it really is important. Again, circling the verb helps here. So if you have to define something, define something. If you have to describe a process and come up with an example, do that. You're not going to get points for doing, you can show a whole lot about social stratification, right? But if all you had to do was define it, you spent all this time showing everything else you know, and you're only going to get those couple of points, right? So make sure you're answering what you're supposed to be answering, and then move on. Now's not the time to show your instructor I know everything in the world about social stratification. Also, writing style is not so important. This is something I personally really struggle with. When I write something down, I want it to sound really good. I want the person who's reading it to think I'm really smart and I know what I'm saying, right? I think it's natural, but this is an exam. It's time. There isn't the expectation that you're going to write this masterpiece in 20 minutes about. I keep using social stratification, but about social stratification, right? It's just tell the instructor what you need to say, legibly, by the way, make sure they can read it, and then move on. You've got more questions to answer after that. Okay. Any questions about those types of questions? Okay. Let's see. In terms of true, false, or multiple choice types of questions, I find that you know a lot, right? You come into the exam having studied. You do know a lot, and it's in there, and you may not feel it at the time, but you do know a lot. So your first impression, not always 100% of the time right. Maybe it's a trick question or something, but usually your first impression is right. Okay, so if you're really struggling with a question and you don't know if it's A or if it's C, well, what did you initially think it was going to be? And can you reason in your head why you thought it was going to be that answer? This also works if you're pressed for time. Well, I think it's probably A. I don't have time to really think that much more about it. A, and then move on, right? Does that make sense? Similarly, time management is really important here. So if you just don't know the answer to a question, again, that's fine. You're not going to know every single thing. You're going to know a lot of things, but not every single thing. So if you really just don't know the answer, Maybe jot down a couple of like notes to yourself so you can come back to it later if you have time. But move on. You've got other questions that you do know the answer to, and you can get points for, right? Move on to those types of questions. Also, I think Dr. Innocenza told me this. Don't always go with this always, but in general, if you really don't know, on a true-false question, true is usually the right answer. Not usually, more often than not, the right answer. I think that's because false questions are a little bit harder to write, so you tend to get more true questions on the exam. Okay, so like, don't rely on that. Don't rely on that as like a technique.
That's a last
Yeah.
guess, but you
Yes.
have no idea what the answer
Yes.
is?
Okay, go with true. Yeah, but yeah. Okay. Okay, so other types of exams, papers, and this is what you're going to be doing a little bit in your first year and probably a lot in your second year. And this is really a skill to build. I think a lot of people in their head, when they have to write a paper about something, and it's this topic that they themselves picked and it's this exciting topic, it becomes really overwhelming, right? Because you in your head, you think like, oh, I've got to like come up with this perfect paper, and like, well, I want to talk about point A and point B and point C, and you like try to like formulate this perfect paper in your head, and then write it down. And that's not how writing works at all. And so you end up like wasting time. You end up, getting really anxious, and then you're pressed for time because you were trying to think about it for too long, in the initial period. And now, oh my God, you have 24 hours to like write your paper. So like it becomes this really like kind of scary thing. So my advice, and this is what I do, just start writing. So like if you want to write, I'm going to say social studies, it doesn't matter. If you want to write any sort of paper, you have some thoughts, right? You're like, I want to talk about point A, I want to talk about point B, I want to talk about point C. Put those things on paper and then sort of figure out what order they might go in. Start from something, and then you have something to edit and to fix and to improve upon and to grow, right? Now you're not sort of building this perfect paper in your head. Instead, you have what is maybe really sort of ugly stream of consciousness thought on a paper, but like now that's something to fix, and that's a lot easier to do than to like think about it and then just spit it out. So like this happens. This doesn't actually happen. Okay, but like I guess neither of these really applies. Don't do this, and that doesn't actually happen. So instead, just start. It can be really ugly. No one has to see it. Like it's just you, so you don't have to be self-conscious that you're writing really ugly here either. You now have time to like fix it and make it sound really pretty, and then someone's going to think you're really smart. So it's doable. Any questions about that like process? Yeah.
I don't have a question, but for me, I find writing like actually handwriting my first draft or like just
Oh, yeah.
write down my ideas is really helpful. Sometimes staring at like a laptop computer like a screen.
Yeah, and you see the blinking thing. Yeah.
Excited for the thing my writing.
Yeah, exactly. And everyone has like their thing that works for them. So like try to figure it out. And just start somewhere. Whether it's on paper, it can totally be on paper. I start most of my stuff on paper. Or if it's on a computer, like find what works for you. And just start. I promise it's going to be really ugly and you're going to go like, oh my God, I wrote this. But it turns into something really pretty, and now it's not this like last minute scramble. Okay. Let's see. So to emphasize that, here I sort of made up a little timeline for how long it might take for you to like write a paper. Okay, so you start with like, just start something. If it's just ideas, if it's stream of consciousness, if it's some sort of like semblance of an outline, just start somewhere. And then fill in the gaps between sort of what you've already written down, right? That can take a few days. So for me, like when I start to write a paper, that's 2 or 3 days worth of time. And it's this really ugly thing, and that doesn't make me feel good, but it's this ugly thing for a few days. But now eventually I've got this like outline, and it'd be an ugly outline again, but it's an outline, right? And I can work from that. And then over time, you move through several drafts of your paper, right? And each draft sort of takes like a day or two to get through. Let's see what I'm missing. Oh, okay. So you end up with your final draft about a week later, and the last step: reread the instructions again. If you were supposed to write a paper about like X, Y, Z, was it actually about X, Y, Z? If you need to change something, I often do because I went off on a tangent. Do it. Now's your time to do it. You still have a day or so to like do it. Okay, and then you're done, right? What this doesn't include though is like breaks, and I recognize that. So you should also take breaks. So I think a good paper probably takes like 2 weeks to write. After I do sort of my like spit everything onto a page and maybe like a first draft, I'm like mentally done with that topic. I hate that topic and I don't want to think about it anymore. So take a day off. given yourself enough time to do that. So take a day off, let it all sort of sink in. Maybe you have got new ideas, maybe you like decide to go in a different direction. You've got time to like think about things again. And at the worst case, you've got something to start from. So that feels really good. You go, oh, I've got a week and a half, and I at least have something to like fix, and I don't have to like come up with some like brand new thing. So take breaks in between if it sinks in. Yeah.
What about for classes like CHS 210 when I think they're only giving us like 2 days?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so this, yeah, no, that's a good question. So like when you have like CHS 210 and you know you don't actually have that much time, like the 2 or 3 days, right? What do you do? Well, okay, you don't really have the luxury of breaks here. It's also though, I think I took CHS 210, and it is sort of take home and writing, but that's more sort of on the like the first part of tests that I was talking about. That's more about just like telling them what you know, answering like a specific question that you're given, and moving on, right? So you don't have to come up with some like great like theory about like why X should relate to Z or something, right? It's more about putting it on paper and moving on. So you have less time to work with, definitely. But the writing style is also not as important there. Yeah.
Question.
Yeah.
What about like on their written comprehensive exam when we only have like a few days? Do they look for writing style, or is it more, it's everything? Okay.
But by the time you take your comprehensive exam, you will have done a lot of writing, and you will be much more practiced at writing.
Mm-hmm.
So we aren't looking for great literature, but we are looking for appropriate things are in order. There are sentences, there are paragraphs, they make a point, and that it's proofed and the like. But I wouldn't worry about that today because you've got time to build towards the comprehensive exam.
Yeah. And you'll just be really smart by then. But yeah.
I'm actually a second year CHS student, and so my advice for 210 would be just looking back, that if you can, try to finish it in one day, so the next day you can look at it as brand new and just read it as if it's someone else reading it, because a lot of times when you write for that midterm and the final, you'll read it as if someone else is understanding it, but that's the problem that a lot of people do. So make sure if you can finish it in one day, just do that, and the next day just kind of read it like it's someone who knows nothing about the topic, so you can, if you can understand things, but
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. And I just took my comprehensive exam and I did the same sort of thing. And it goes back to my like plan for less time than you actually have thing, right? So if you have 2 days to do it, spit it all out, do your ugly first draft on day 1, and then you've got it's a different sort of timeline, but you have day 2 then to like make it sound better, right? So like try to get it all onto paper so that it can sit there and you can think about it, right? Early, so that you're not sort of rushing just to get the last ideas onto a page at the last moment. And I think that's a really good point. Yeah. Okay. So inevitably that timeline does, as we just talked about, does not always work, right? So sometimes you don't have that much time to write a paper. Sometimes you did procrastinate. Sometimes stuff happens, right? You don't always have 2 weeks to write a really good paper. So what do you do? Well, I think it's really now about time management. Use your time as wisely as possible, right? So I think here it's really important just to sort of know yourself, right? Know how you are as a writer. Find your rhythm, right? Find how you work and what, sort of writer that you are, and accommodate that the best you can. So like, for instance, I'm not very good at sort of like doing small pieces here and then coming back a little bit later doing small pieces. I like to get everything on paper, like basically what I just told you to do. You don't have to do it, but this is what I do. Get everything on paper and then sort of work from there. So I tend to put in sort of longer hours over, fewer days, or over, or over a shorter amount of time. So that's just me. That doesn't work for everyone. Some people work, 2 hours a day and then they're done. And then they come back the next day, 2 hours a day, and then they're done. And that's fine. That totally works. So just find what works for you. You'll discover over the next couple of years, but so by the time you get to your comprehensive exam, you'll sort of know what type of writer you are, and try to accommodate that the best that you can. Also, I think this is really important. Find where you work the best. So for me, I'm a coffee shop writer, studier. Most people don't do well there. I do really well there. So I work really well in that environment. There's one coffee shop I always go to right near my house. I've like done the first 2 years of my PhD there. Like, I've given them so much business, but it works, and they have so much money. But it really works, right? So I know that I work well there. I'm not that. I mean, I can if I need to. I can study in the library or at home, but I do better in a coffee shop, and so I make that happen for myself. Find what works for you in terms of place as well. Does that make sense? Yeah. And then finally, do you really need the internet? Sometimes you do. Sometimes you need the internet to like look for sources or to like look up concepts. And if you're sort of on that ugly first draft phase, you need to like pull chunks of text in. You know, you might need the internet to like think about things, but usually you don't. I'm someone who tends to like whenever my email goes off, oh my god, I have to look at it. I have to read it. You know, I have a job. I have to read it and maybe respond to it. But do you really like? I go to my coffee shop. 3 hours or whatever, right? And I work on a paper and I do have a really good 3 hours. Like almost any email, any like whatever can wait for 3 hours, right? So actually part of the reason I like this coffee shop is because the internet's sort of spotty. Like it's there, but it's sort of spotty. And so sometimes that's not even an option. And those are the best days for me. It's like I'm really productive. So avoid really that's just about avoiding distractions. And I think internet is today one of the biggest distractions to like being productive and getting work done. And getting work done in a timely manner. Cool. And this is, again, if you have questions, chime in. This is my last slide. But so another thing is about having ideas, right? I mean, when you're writing this like perfect paper, you have to have really good ideas to put on the paper. And not almost never, like literally never do I have good ideas when I sit down to have good ideas. If you sit down and like try to like think about what you're supposed to say, like it just never really works that way, right? I get really good ideas in the shower. I get really good ideas like in the car on the way to school when like I can't do anything about it. And so for me, and like my partner probably thinks I'm insane, I have notepads all over the place, right? I got one by the bed. I've got one by the shower. I've got one in my car, right? So whenever I have an idea, that pops into my head, I write it down. Okay, now it's on paper. It's there. I won't forget it. I can come back to it, and now I can put that into my ugly first draft document. Like it all builds, right? So ideas pop up in weird places. They pop up when you're relaxing, probably in bed, and that's actually I think that's like a biological thing, right? It's your brain is like decompressing. Your brain is like making sense of everything you just learned that day or over that past week, and it's. Your brain sometimes just clicks when you're like not expecting it, and so keep a notepad by the bed, by the shower, everywhere. I think that helps me, and just expect that you're not going to have. You might, but you're not going to have like all of your good ideas when it's convenient. Does that make sense? But yeah, so I want to be a resource to you. So if you have any questions, like please, this is my email. Please do feel free to reach out to me at any time. I've been through CHS 210. I've been through a lot of the classes you're going to take. I can offer advice. But does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
On a short answer, kind of in class format,
Mm-hmm.
do you recommend maybe like jotting down a few notes or like quickly outlining what you have to say, or just getting it and like writing?
Yeah. So you're saying like on a short answer exam, should you sort of like go through the outline steps or just start going?
Well, not those steps.
Yeah. But some semblance of steps. I find, I would say yes. I think that really helps to write. It doesn't have to be like as detailed or pretty, but yeah, I think it helps to like come up with some sort of outline and say, okay, well, I have to talk about A, I have to talk about B, I have to talk about C. And now it's sitting there looking at you as you're writing it, and you go like, oh my god, I spent 10 minutes writing about A, and I have to like get to B and C. So it helps you keep track of what you're writing, helps you, ration your time in that way. So I find that really helpful. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Have you used the Writing Center? And if so, have they helped you, or just what kind of resources have you gotten from there?
Yeah, so the Writing Center, I actually haven't used the Writing Center. Almost everyone I know has used the Writing Center. The Writing Center is a really great resource. I have friends that have gone to them for like papers for classes to like much bigger papers that they're working on. The Writing Center is a really great resource for helping you, formulate your thoughts and helping you come up with techniques to like actually write a good paper. I think that's a really good resource. Yeah.
Can't emphasize that enough. As you go through the program, the expectations for your writing skills just keeps going up and up, and you want to keep pace on that. A lot of people don't think their writing skills are that great, And it really takes practice. And at the Writing Center, they give you different ways of practicing and strategies for doing things. And if you build them over the course of the 2 years that you're here, when you go out and you need those writing skills on your job, you're going to have them. Because I guarantee you, you're going to have to write on the job. Nobody has ever gone to the Writing Center and said it didn't help.
Agreed. Yeah. Oh.
So can you give an example of like a multiple choice question, like, because you said so the undergrad, grad expectations are different, so could you give an example of like a multiple choice question at the grad level versus like an undergrad?
Yes, it's actually been a while since I've answered a multiple choice question. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't have an example in my head, but I don't think multiple choice questions are as much about like tricking you. So I'm thinking about like undergrad, right? There were often like two-part like questions or two-part answers, right? Well, if I have to like say how like I did biology, so like some sort of like X protein worked in the body, there would be, a true part to the question and a false part to the question, and then like a false part to this question. And so like it would be a little bit, you have to like sort of sort through in your head and be more about tricking you. I get the sense though that it's less about tricking you and more about.
I can give you
Okay.
an example of a question like that. In the Whitehall studies, they found a gradient between socioeconomic status and health. Which of the following illustrates that principle? And then maybe it gives you an example that people who have low status jobs have more health problems, but anybody who has a white collar job and above has about the same level of health. Well, the answer to that question is wrong because it's not a gradient. So you're applying the concept to a different example. So maybe they say there's somebody did a study of engineers and they found the more the engineers worked, the lower their probability of getting heart disease. The more they earned, the less their probability of getting heart disease. Gradient. So you're being asked, you're given a fact that you've covered in class, and then being asked to recognize that in wearing different clothes. So the expectation on even a multiple choice like that is you have to think to answer the question, as distinct from just remembering the information, you're applying the information. When I write these exams, you were saying, if I could just elaborate one point, if you took one of my exams, you're unlikely to come out with 100 on it. I teach 100, CHS 100. You wouldn't take that, so you don't have to worry about that. But you might write a paper for me. I designed the exam so some questions, the only people in the class who will miss those questions are people who didn't do the reading and didn't come to class. If you came to class, you're going, oh, an easy exam. The bulk of the questions on an exam of mine, you did the reading, you came to class, you should know the answer. Then there are a set of questions that are, well, you really have to love this subject and you really got into it and you are thinking about it day and night to get the answers to these questions. Because I want the whole spectrum there. So I deliberately ask questions that I think are hard that I'm not expecting most people to get the answer to that. Because I want people to be, I want to know what the range is of what people are getting. Sometimes do I write an exam and a lot of people get 100 and I guess that was too easy an exam. Sometimes they err the other way. But it won't be uncommon for you to come out of an exam and take an exam and not know all the questions on it. So don't get thrown by that. Oh, my other advice is read the question, answer the question. The number one mistake that I see over and over, whether it's on a midterm or it's on a term paper or the comprehensive exam, is a question asked you to do something and it wasn't done. So the example I gave an exam and it said, draw a diagram. And some people didn't draw a diagram. You can't get credit for the diagram if you don't draw the diagram. If you draw a diagram and it's, partially right, you get partial credit for it. But if you put it in words and don't draw it, no credit. The other big one is 5 pages. You write 6 pages, page 6 doesn't count.
I can tell you from
I can
experience.
tell you that happens. Now, the one that gets me, and I am teaching the doctoral analysis classes for, that is the doctoral class. Put your name on it. I gave that instruction, and I got one without a name on it. That's not so good either. There. And the other thing that I was going to say, if you have test-taking anxiety, and I know said this is a condition for some people, Student Psychological Services, they have programs to help you deal with test anxiety. And you might look into, everybody might look into stress relaxation techniques here. And if you have some sort of disability, you should avail yourself of the Student Office for Students with Disabilities. If you need additional time to take an exam or for a take-home exam like that, they do an assessment, they run everything, it's completely confidential. And if that fits into your needs, there's no reason not to avail yourself of that.
Cool. Yeah.
Just a quick question. So I was an undergrad in psychology here, which we do a lot of multiple choice tests and not writing.
Mhm.
So I know how to test myself if I have just some knowledge of multiple choice, kind of like defining a term, can I define it without looking at the definition?
Mhm.
In terms of concepts in writing, how can you test your knowledge whether or not you feel prepared for an exam?
Yeah, no, that's a
based
good.
on the reading?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So, like preparing for multiple choice versus preparing for sort of other types of exams. I think studying with a group, work with other people to study. That really, really helps. Okay, so you get a group of people. Everyone knows some things. Everyone doesn't know some things, and everyone doesn't know different things. And so working with people and talking through concepts and, well, what does this mean? You can ask a question, say, you know what, I don't know what this means. I don't get it. Does someone know this? And someone, oh, I know that. And then working with people, I think, really does help solidify concepts, helps strengthen your own understanding of a concept, and really helps test whether you all actually understand that concept. Because someone will have some different take on it or some different view on it, and it may not be wrong. It may be right in a different way of looking at it. So I think working with people in study groups is a really great way to test whether you're ready. Mm-hmm.
It's a good idea in your test, in your study groups. Write some questions. What do you think is going to be asked about this article? When you're studying for the exam, you ought to ask yourself, what could be asked about this? Because there's actually not that many questions usually that can be asked on a given article. And once you get a little used to it, you go, well, they're not going to ask about this. It's so amorphous. What would you ask? But here are things. There are 5 points here. They could easily ask me what those 5 points are. So if in your study group you take turns with the articles and with the lectures, writing different kinds of questions, and you take the questions, you find out you've got different answers on them. Then you have something to discuss. You write out short answers. You have somebody read it, and they say, oh, yeah, gee, that looks right to me. Or, I don't understand what you're saying. Then you're getting really productive work on preparing for the exam. And as long as everybody does it, it's a fair give and take.
Any more questions? All right. Well, it was really nice to meet all of you. Please do reach out to me if you have questions.
Now, I can see quite a few anxious faces out here. Now, I do study stress and mental health. That is my area. And I'm seeing as I look out here that the anxiety level is higher than when you came in. And you ate and you're digesting your food, so you ought to be feeling more relaxed, not more tense. Most of you are going to do extremely well on all of your exams. You're here. We picked you. We picked you for good reasons because we thought you would succeed. And these things that we're talking about here are things for you to use to actualize your potential in the program. Are they all going to hit you on your first exam? No. But if you are preparing in the right way and you've thought about the exam beforehand, then you're going to walk into it confidently, you're going to sit down, and you're going to do well on it. If you haven't given it any thought and you walk in, you might go, huh, what's this kind of question? I wasn't expecting that. So this is really meant to give you a nudge, not to overwhelm you with anxiety about it. You don't think you understand the concepts in the class? If you don't go and talk to your instructors about it, you miss the boat there. I hold my office hours, people come week 9. I kid you not. I'm sitting there most of the time going, well, I've got to be here for my office hours. Where's a student? Send me a student. Go see your instructors.